when you take a look at the image, just reduce it down. It's just showing you a couple of things from the history of this company, plus some of the logos and the current graphics that they have and have used. This is when the company first started out in California and into Oregon. These are some of the early trucks that they had and trailers. And you can see the graphics that they have for UHAUL, for it was a self-moving company. And when it gets into some of these graphics up here, this is just some from Ohio. So when you take a look at Akron, these are on the smaller trailers, and then they have these piece from Wapakoneta, which is just west of us. And then these super graphics that you may see, this is a serpent mound that's down there. So they've tried to incorporate that piece, and by doing so, they've created what they call a rolling billboard, which is a billboard that's movable since it's on the side of a truck, and that's the characteristic of this old school logo that they have here for this piece. So when you take a look at this graphic, just going to lock these two images on the bottom, work on the top, and you're going to try to bring this into Photoshop, similar to what you did with the previous logo, to put that in there. The Option R is just a keystroke, and you can always find the glyphs on all of the fonts listed in the glyph panel that's on the type. And if you don't have this font, Arial Black is the next best thing. You don't really want to sit there and trace it over, but just go ahead and use the font itself. So if I type it in here with capital and just place it on there so you can see it, this is UHAUL. Just stretching it out with the Shift key, setting it up here, and I think I have the type panel up here. So if I put in Arial or just type in the beginning, you can see all the different fonts that you can get. So if you're doing something like this just for exercise, wouldn't necessarily outline the font. But if you take a look, I've submitted the font with you on the file to take a look at, Gears of Peace, and when you open this one up, this one has a little bit of it to install. And so just to show you the difference, click this and put a option up at the top and go ahead and type in Gears of Peace, and that's the font that comes through. So it's much more adaptable to this style than the rest. So we'll work on the font, but first, just taking a look at the outside edge of this rectangular shape is a square, so I have it solid black just so you can see it. Reverse it so it's just the stroke, and you can adjust the width and height just to try to match this part. But the inside widget, you can just go ahead and curve onto that section. So that makes it very, very easy. And then with the stroke panel, just increase a little bit. To do the second one that's in here, you could draw it again and move it, but just going to go to Object, Path, and offset this path. And this is set to points. And hit Preview so you can see it. If I increase it using the arrow key rather than try to type it in, that way I can watch what's happening on the screen much easier. And take that piece. Take the Direct Selection tool, deselect over here, and then click on just this point to get that particular widget. Just drag it over top of itself, and that gives it a corner point right at the top. Just going to take the eyedropper and fill it. So that's the orange. Shift X just to make it an outline long enough for me to drag this down here to the bottom, and then Shift X. So that makes that pretty easy. Take the text tool and just click and hold down Option. Let's see if it's going to make it here. Make sure I have a different font. This time I'm going to take the font of Helvetica. So let's see if I can just type in HE and just go for Helvetica, bold, and just type in Option R. And that gives me the registration mark with the Shift key held down. I can drag that right to there. And again, if that's too bold, you can always just take the boldness off of this and just go regular. And like I said, it's a good idea just to click inside here and use the arrow key so you can watch what's happening on screen. for that piece. So here's the UHAUL. I'll just drag a copy of it down here. Shift key to scale it just a little bit to get it close. It may not be perfectly exact, but we'll come up with it as best we can. So you can shrink the top to the bottom with this and it gets pretty close. Okay, rather than stretch this out, stretch it in a little bit so you can kind of see the type that's there. And again, it's going to be a little bit off. It's not going to be the perfect font, but you want to get as close as you can for this section. So I'll move these guys out of the way, and I'm just going to put a copy of this just in case the next step I goof up. I select and go to Type, create the outline. So now this type is grouped together, but it's all outlined. It's no longer editable. But I take the direct selection tool, and that brings me up to this H. So I'm just going to deselect it, but select just the points that are on this horizontal piece to drag this over. And you can see that I can just hold the key down and it'll shoot across. I'm going to move this guy over with the direct selection tool. So select the U and just shift key and drag them over there. So these are selected. It's overlapping. Just going to go to the shape builder and drag it across and bottom. So now it's one piece, X is one graphic. Do the same with the letter A, just large enough to grab that piece, or shift key to grab just those two anchor points and drag that across. Okay, same thing, you can use the shape builders to make it one solid piece. Have it, so now I'm just going to drag that in there. Like I said, I don't want to overdo it, but I just want to keep it right into side length and width. And you can adjust it a little bit, try to get as close as you can to it. Take the direct selection tool if you want to bump some of these over, but you can kind of see where they're headed. And with this L shaped again, just zoom in. Select these 2 points, the shift key, and just button it up a little bit. So it's pretty close. You can even push it further, but I don't want you to take too much time in messing with that. But that's the initial selection, so when you take those two off, that's the graphic that you have. And then by selecting this and go to Edit Copy, and I already have Photoshop open, so I can go to paste it in there. If I give a new layer. And this is the pixels that come in, and I'm just going to lay it as pixels, and when it starts off, it's a pretty good resolution size. And I can shift key this as I go through it, and Option or place it right dead center, and that gives me the piece to then use some of the effects that are in Photoshop. So if I have the background, you can see that section is there. I didn't give it a white background, so I'm just going to go back to Illustrator and select this, make this a lot easier, and just select white, and that's going to be the background. Object arrange, send it to back so you can see it, and just redo that. So I'm going to copy it, and Command Tab. Paste this in here, and again, you have 4 options, but just to work with the pixels right away, Shift key and the option keeps it centered, I think. Let's see. Okay, and hit return. So now if I double click on this, I have the layer styles just to, for example, just to give it a drop shadow. Change the distance or the spread or the opacity just to give it a look to it. I can bevel and emboss this piece. So it's just trying to give you some options for that. If you recall from some of the pieces before, if I select this with the Command key, you can do the select and place that on a different side. But those are different ways that you can modify it. And you have the filters that you can try for the background, placing that in there. And then when you're finished, just click on the Tab key or the F key just to give you that selection. You can zoom into it a little bit and then do Command-Shift-4 to get the screen capture of it, depending on how much white space you want around that piece. And just to show you where that's going to be, I'll list it on here, desktop. So that's your screenshot for that.